Hey, welcome everybody to this Friday late here in. So those of you watching on YouTube and Facebook, you continue to get a um, view of my various hotel rooms all over the world. We've now done shows from London, Zurich, and Paris. I wanted to do a few shows from the Canary Islands where I was at, where I was attending a conference, but the internet connection was just way, way, way too weak to even contemplate trying to do that. So no, it's been a while. I apologize for that. It's been I think a week since we had a show. So somebody's saying it's about the perfect time to visit Paris. It's a beautiful day today. Unfortunately, I'm going to be here basically less than 24 hours, and I've got to give a talk tomorrow, so I'm not going to be able to go and do all the fun stuff that I love doing in Paris, like going to the Louvre or going to the Musée d'Orsay or just walking around the city. So a little bit of walking, but unfortunately, quick trip. No matter. Been here before. I love Paris. It's a great city, and continues to be beautiful. Walked around tonight, and it's gorgeous. All right. A number of topics I want to talk a little bit more about Judge Kavanaugh, and it looks like there's breaking news on that. Something related to Kavanaugh that relates to Facebook, Amazon's $15 minimum wage, maybe some other things. We'll see. And of course, there's always the super chat that is accessible to those of you on YouTube. So if you want to ask a question and you're willing to put some money behind it, then use the super chat feature on YouTube. All right, so it looks like Kavanaugh is going to be approved by the Senate. It is a Democratic senator has now said that he would vote for Kavanaugh, and I think almost all the Republicans, maybe with one exception, have said that they would vote for him. So it looks like he will be approved, probably 51-49 or 50-50, with Mike Pence breaking the tie, but it looks like it's going to happen. It's it's the right thing. I've said this before. I'm no fan of Brett Kavanaugh. I don't think I'm not excited about him going to the Supreme Court. He's way too political as a judge. He's had a career in politics. He's much too much a Republican rather than a judge with a clear judicial philosophy. He is too much of a conservative, and I think would vote to overthrow Roe versus Wade and maybe some other potential issues regarding civil liberties. But so I've never been too enthusiastic about Kavanaugh of the short list. There was in the short list that Trump had. I don't think I would have been excited by any of them. But I think he and the woman who was ultra Catholic were the two that I was least excited about. And primarily with Kavanaugh, it's because of how political he's been. He was part of the Bush administration. He was part of the investigation of the Clintons and the whole impeachment ridiculous fiasco. And anyway, that's the reasons. And then again, his judicial philosophy is far too, mainstream standard conservative for my liking. I think probably Gorsuch is a far better judge. But given all that, I think he's qualified. And I don't think, and I've said this from the beginning of these hearings, I don't think that that these allegations were grounds for voting against him. I actually don't think these allegations should even be heard by the committee. I don't think the allegations are relevant to the issue before us. That is the issue of whether he should be appointed to the Supreme Court. I've said this before. I'll say it one more time. It astounds me. I mean, how people misrepresent my views about these issues. I was reading somebody wrote let me just find this. Yeah, somebody wrote on my a comment under the video in YouTube, and he says, His treatment of the arbitrary as the possible is also disappointing. I discussed why uh, Ford's claim is not arbitrary. It might be wrong, it might be unproven, it might be lacking, almost any evidence. But I wouldn't say, but it was not arbitrary. Epistemologically, it's not arbitrary. And I never said we have to investigate. I said you have to investigate if you want to know the truth, but I don't think the truth is relevant here. His insistence on a trial for Kavanaugh is ad lib. So again, I never insisted on a trial for Kavanaugh. I said that if you wanted to find the truth, you would have to take this to trial. But I've said over and over again, I don't think it's relevant because I don't think something you did 30 something years ago when you were 17 is relevant in your 50s in a job interview for the Supreme Court or for any other job. I don't think any employer should take into account the actions of a 17. I mean, short of you murdered somebody, or if he'd raped her, or if he'd done, but he didn't rape her. Even if he did what he's accused of doing, he certainly didn't murder anybody. He probably got drunk a lot. He probably did really stupid things when he was drunk. That I have no doubt about. He probably lied to the committee, but the context of this lying is so absurd. The whole procedure, the whole circus around this is so absurd that the hearing should have never happened. There has to be a statute of limitations for not just criminal statutes of limitation, but also a statute of limitations around, in a sense, job interviews for these kind of things. Stuff you did when you were 17 is irrelevant. So anyway, it's amazing to me how people listen to the show and really it kind of don't really get what I'm saying at all. But maybe it's my lack of communication skills. We'll have to work on that. So he's going to be approved. I think that's probably the right thing in this circumstances to do. I think it's tragic, and I think we're going to pay a heavy price into the future. That the extent to which this has become a bipartisan issue, I think this bipartisan this gulf, complete and utter gulf between Democrats and Republicans, to the point of scheming and dishonesty and just voting almost down the party line and everything is incredibly destructive. It never used to be like this for the Supreme Court. They did disqualify Bork in the 80s, but that was primarily because of his legal philosophy. They didn't have to come up with these kind of allegations. But the ugliness of our political lives today, both on the right and on the left. In this case, it's mostly on the left, but it's in this particular case, but it's on both the right and the left. Remember that to a large extent, Republicans started it by not considering the Supreme Court nominee that Obama made. It was pure partisan politics, understandable, but it wouldn't be surprising that Democrats will do anything to undercut a Republican nominee, given what Republicans did with the Democratic nominee, Obama's Democratic nominee, where they basically wouldn't even consider him. It said they wouldn't consider him until the election, until at the time it was unlikely Donald Trump would win, but they were hoping, and indeed he won, and they got to vacate that appointment and to appoint their own two nominees. So in many respects, this has been going back and forth, but really, really, really horrible. The state of our political discourse. It's never been good, and one of the scariest things to me is when the political parties get along and get together and pass laws. I like gridlock. I like stalemate, but at the end of the day, there are going to be heavy prices to pay for the hatred, the vicious hatred, not just in politics, but not just among politicians, but among the American public around these issues. Because at some point, we're going to have to do something about Social Security. We're going to have to do something about Medicare. You're going to have to cut government spending. You're only going to be able to do that if you do it bipartisan, in a bipartisan fashion. You're only going to be able to do it if you get the Republicans and Democrats together to do a plan. It might not be my plan, it might not be an ideal plan, but you have to do something to curb government spending in the next 10 years. If you don't, this country is history. It's toast. It's bankrupt completely, utterly. We go into depression, we go into long-term stagnation, and really, our economy is finished and over. And yet, given the rhetoric by both parties, unless one of the parties gets an overwhelming majority and can do whatever the hell it wants, then you're going to have to work together. And there's no possibility because the American people don't want, I mean, Republicans and Democrats seem to be at the point today where they hate each other's guts. Now, I would have some sympathy towards that if they hated each other's guts because of ideas, but it's not really because of ideas. It's it's superficiality. It's my collectivism versus your collectivism. It's my, it's my statism versus your statism. There's no real fundamental difference anymore between Republicans and Democrats. Anyway, Kavanaugh is going to be elected, so those of you Republicans can be happy. But it's really, I think the state of American politics is really sad and pathetic, and we're going to have to. I don't know what we're going to do. I really fear for the future of the country. Politicians in any case unwilling to take on the difficult task of actually doing the right thing and shrinking government spending and passing regulations or passing deregulation or doing away with regulations at the legislative level to actually keep this economy going and to keep it happening. But it's not going to happen. So where does the country end up? And it can't end up, and it's not going to get up in a good place. So exactly when we face these major challenges is hard to tell. But the way we're heading, the tribalism we're encountering, the collectivism, the brute, unabashed, explicit collectivism, we're going to pay a heavy price in the years to come for it. We're going to pay a heavy price for Trump, and we're going to pay a heavy price, already are, for the identity politics of the left, right and left, failing us and leading us down a very, very ugly road. Well, one of the manifestations of this ugly road is happened this week in Facebook. And article in the New York Times. I know. I'm not supposed to cite anything from the New York Times. It's a rag, and indeed, I believe it is an incredibly biased newspaper. But they actually write news, and if you want to know what's going on in the world, there's very few sources to get that. You just have to discount the bias. But this story is about Facebook. It seems pretty accurate. I don't have any reason to doubt it. It didn't seem slanted to me, but then you never know, of course. So I'm giving it to you with the caveats that it comes from the New York Times, and a caveat that I would tell you about any newspaper, anything came from. Anyway, it turns out that one of Brett Kavanaugh's best friends is a guy named Joe Kaplan. And Joe Kaplan is Facebook's vice president for global public policy. And he is a Republican, and he sits in Washington, D.C., and he's responsible for global public policy. So much for the idea that Facebook only has leftists. Indeed, Joe Kaplan was hired in 2011 partially to establish some balance. So they hired somebody from the Republican Party to kind of eliminate the suspicions, not eliminate, but quieten down the suspicions that they were dominated by leftists. Anyway, Joe Kaplan turns out, has known Brett Kavanaugh for many years in Washington, D.C. I think they served in the Bush administration together. and he is a very senior person at Facebook, although he works in the DC office, not in the. It's interesting how all these companies have DC offices. Just an aside, we're going to take a quick aside here. Why do all the tech companies have DC offices? Now, I don't know if Apple does, but Google does and Facebook does. Apple probably does. Why? Well, it's a famous story. You probably heard me tell it many times before. But the famous story of Microsoft in the mid 1990s, and Microsoft in the mid 1990s had no Washington office, and Microsoft in the 1990s they spend no money on what do you call it? On lobbying. Had no lawyers in DC, nothing, right? And they were literally brought in front of Congress, and Orrin Hatch, the Republican from Utah, stood up and yelled at them. You guys have got to get involved in Washington, D.C. You've got to open offices in here. You've got to act. You've got to be in D.C. And Microsoft's response at that meeting was, no, we're not interested. You've got nothing to give us. You leave us alone. We'll leave you alone. We're just going to leave it at that. And they walked out. And of course, you all know the story. A few months later, knock, knock, knock at Microsoft's door. We are here from the Justice Department. We're going to go after you for antitrust because you dared to offer a product for free. For free. Bundling. You bundled Internet Explorer with Windows. And Netscape doesn't like that because at the time we were all paying $75 for Netscape. So, and I won't go through the whole story. Microsoft suffered through the court system, and then regulators in-house at Microsoft approving deals for about 10 years, destroyed the company. What was the lesson learned? Well, the lesson learned from Microsoft was you got to be in DC. So they spend tens of millions of dollars today. They've got a beautiful building in DC. They've got a lot of staff in DC. And of course, Facebook and Google and the others know this and saw this and experienced, and were looking from the sideline, and they, from the beginning, have had offices in DC. Now, you might say, oh, they're all cronies. We hate those Silicon Valley companies. No, they're just trying to survive. What are they supposed to do? They saw what happened to Microsoft, and now they're trying to survive. It's an act of self-defense. Anyway, so Joe Kaplan is the lobbyist in chief, if you will. Global Public Policy is his title, Vice President for Global, and he's a friend of Kavanaugh. And during Kavanaugh's, he sat like 2 rows behind Kavanaugh and was clearly visible on TV screens. And this became a big deal at Facebook because Facebook employees. What is a senior official from Facebook doing at Kavanaugh? We taking political sides. Now notice suddenly they're worried about taking political sides on the right when they so often take a political side on the left. Anyway, there's this massive uproar now, at least according to the New York Times and Facebook, about Joel Kaplan going to the testimony of his friends. Joel says he's one of Kavanaugh's one of his best friends, and he wanted to show support. And this is a big deal now. And in the beginning, Zuckerberg has said, look, he broke no company rules. Wasn't there as a representative of Facebook. He was on time off, although it's whether he actually took the time off or later wrote it off as time off. But he wasn't representing Facebook there and so on. And this is not appease people, and people are writing in. This is, Facebook this is wrong of Facebook to do. It makes them feel uncomfortable. This is a snowflake generation, the nutty snowflake generation that is offended by somebody defending himself against allegation of sexual attack, is offended by the fact that somebody might support his friend, is offended but won't work in the same company as somebody who might have a different political view or might have a different view of the events around the Kavanaugh hearing. One of the guys at Facebook wrote this actually really good email. Let me see. Let me see if I can find this. You know, Kaplan says, I believe, friends, especially when times are rough. He texted this or emailed this. Um, you know, and he said that we felt it was important to be with them at the hearing to express our love. Da 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 da. But then last Friday, let's see, you know, the HR people said that Zuckerberg's remark about not making a big deal out of this, basically remarks called stress and trauma and were painful. This is the VP of HR. I mean, this is the snowflake generation. Many female employees were also upset when Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, who supposedly has made women's issue a personal platform and project, I'm reading for the paper, did not publicly say something about all of this. You know, a Republican. You can't do that. She posted last Friday. She said, as a woman and as someone who cares so deeply about how women are treated, the Kavanaugh issue is deeply upsetting to me. I've talked to Joel about why I think it was a mistake for him to attend, given his role in the company. But that wasn't good enough. That wasn't good enough for staff at Facebook. So it's just this, you know, this crazy kind of witch hunt, or I don't know if it's a witch hunt, but crazy kind of recriminations going on within Facebook. People are really upset. And I don't know how many, it's hard to tell if this is a majority of the people. It clearly is. It clearly is something that is shaking. Somebody wrote, let's see, Mr. 13-year-old veteran of post, if you need to change teams, companies, careers to make sure your day-to-day life matches your passions, we will be sad to see you go, but we will understand. We will support you with any path you choose, but it is your responsibility to choose a path, not that of the company you work for. In other words, if you can't handle this, grow up. That's basically what Bosworth was saying. And then, of course, he had a backpedal. He had a backpedal immediately after. So you're seeing this. And this is one of the things that the whole Kavanaugh thing brings to the forefront, I think. But really, I've talked about many times on the show about this trend in our culture, and that is the elevation of emotions above reason. The whole hate speech, the whole offensive speech, the whole snowflake, safe spaces, microaggressions, it's all about elevating emotion above all else. What's important is how you feel. What's important is the emotion that is invoked in you. Everything is about emotion these days. And you saw this with the Kavanaugh hearing, right? Both Ford and Kavanaugh used emotion. It wasn't about facts. Neither presented facts. Neither presented evidence. I mean, Kavanaugh tried at least to present some evidence in terms of the diary and so on. But what he presented was anger. And I can understand his anger. And she presented an allegation, and everybody felt sorry for her. And everybody, you know, it seemed like a really sad story. But at the end of the day, it was, there was no grounds for it. And now people are demonstrating on the basis of what? And now the claim is, we're supposed to accept anything a woman says, any accusations a woman says on face value because she's a woman. And again, this is, I think, related to the whole intersectionality of the left, the whole idea of oppressive classes, and oppressed classes have, you know, their words, have more truth value, right? Because remember, postmodernism and the whole new left agenda, there is no such thing as truth. Everything is subjective. So you have to give more value to somebody who's been oppressed than to somebody who is a white male, and so there's no there's no regard for truth. There's no regard for facts because there's no regard for reason anymore. We live in a culture where reason is being relegated to unimportant. It's relegated to a little bit of science, a little bit of tech, but even in the tech industry, look at these people. I mean, even if everything Ford said about Kavanaugh is true, I mean, get a grip. First of all, this is 30 something years ago. Second, okay, it's horrible. It's not nice, but it's not affecting your life. It's not something that you should personally. Uh, it's just, it is really, really scary to see people, intelligent people, people who work at Facebook are not idiots, um, completely break down and it's pure emotion. And of course, the leadership at Facebook has no moral basis by which to defend its position. The position is no big deal that Kaplan was there. So it constantly has to backtrack and has to compromise and has to appease the majority. So it can't stand up and say and take a strong moral stance. It can't articulate a strong moral stance. It can't be pro reason. It can't take a position as, even if the position is a neutral position, it can't take a strong neutral position. We don't have the facts. It's okay to disagree. Be so sensitive. In a senior position, right? And because this is the culture, um, where on the one hand you have true on Facebook as well. I wonder. Let me see if people are commenting on this on Facebook. Is Facebook? If you can tell me if video and audio are breaking up. Sorry, the internet connection is good. And uh, I can, okay, I'm back. The struggle we face today in the world today is the battle between emotion, and you're seeing that in this example. Hearings, you saw that in the demonstration, people getting arrested, and all this stuff. Um, and for evidence, no, there's no respect. Period. For facts, reality, um, is relevant for context, for for what this for what reason represents, for thinking mind, for what the Supreme Court represents, and therefore what is relevant and what's not relevant in evaluating the Supreme Court judge is none of that, and as a consequence, pause. I talked about this partnership, about this tribe, and all of that exists in the context of emotions. I mean, tribe versus your tribe versus your emotions, my fear against your fear, my love against your love. And there's no talking about, there's no facts because nobody's listening. Everybody's just obsessing about the specific emotions that are involved. The people hate Kavanaugh not because he's a some people because he's a white male and they've been trained to hate white males. Some people because he's a Republican and people have been trained to hate white Republicans. Some people like. Fortunately, that's a minority. I think the majority have an opinion about Kavanaugh, an opinion. Um, let's see. Okay, if we're back and you guys, oops. Okay, sucks. Can I say? I don't. This my wife sometimes uh, really, really sucks. Streaming all the time. No, I'm recording from the stream. All right. Let's see. All right. Let's call that a show, I guess. A couple one, but made it the light. Somebody made it the. Of course, the live stream is not working very well. Let me do this. Let's get some. Let's do that. Maybe that. Okay. One other topic. So again, emotion for reason. Let's talk a little bit about yeah, internet à la Rousseau. Somebody this is French internet, but it's a W hotel. It's supposed to have good internet, but it's not stable. So when I did a speed test, there's enough bandwidth to do up and download and everything. Actually, the upload speeds were quite good, and what we're doing here is uploading. It's the fact that internet wireless, particularly the hotels, is just unstable and goes in and out. And what you're seeing is sometimes the video is great, sometimes the video is great and it works fine, and then other times it's just awful, and it's just the inconsistency of hotel wireless connections. I have to talk about Kavanaugh, the Kavanaugh hearings and the Kavanaugh thing again. Uh, TechCo says speed tests are not the same as video. I'm not sure I understand that. I thought video is just one thing that travels, and anyway, I don't know. Carry the stream to somewhere. I'm trying to get technical advice from my YouTube followers, but I'm not getting anything very successful. I want to talk about Amazon's. I don't know if you heard, but Amazon is now paying all its warehouse employees, all its minimum wage employees, or its minimum, the people who paid low salaries. They have raised the minimum wage you can get in Amazon to $15 an hour. Now, this is again an example of how politics and business are interwound, and how politics and business are inseparable. And so think about all the flack that Amazon has been getting from the Trump administration and from Bernie Sanders. Not an accident to both Trump. Constant about the poor workers and the low income, and you saw Tucker Carlson. Amy Peikoff was on Tucker Carlson talking about this. Tucker Carlson attacking um, Amazon for paying its employees too little, right? Too little. And the implication was that something would be done to go after Amazon. Congress wants to go after Amazon. Trump certainly has talked often about going after Amazon. Now, the flip side of that is Amazon could say, we don't care, like Microsoft did in the early 90s. But Amazon also has vast contracts with the government. Amazon's cloud services provides massive services to the US government. And of course, they don't want to have the government pressure them on price. They don't want to have the government maybe withdraw from Amazon Cloud Services. There is competition to Amazon Cloud Services. But they just, the government is waving a gun at them. It's not quite pointing at them. It's not quite pulling the trigger. Trump hasn't done anything. But rhetoric matters. The bully pulpit matters. Threats matter. So the fact that they have been harassed by Trump for all these months, the fact that the Democrats who are Democrats as an evil rubber who could pay his employees more but doesn't. All of that, is, I think, ultimately caused Amazon to say, okay, we'll raise the minimum wage to 15. We'll do what you want. And by the way, Amazon said, we are now going to lobby for a nationwide $15 an hour. Because if we're going to have to raise it to $15 an hour, we would like our competitors to raise it to $15 an hour. And stability. But then soon enough, it becomes you advocating to penalize your own competitors. And ultimately, this is a game that everybody loses, including really sad and tragic to see this happening. It's sad and tragic to see Amazon playing the game. But on the other hand, what choice do they have? What choice do they have? What couldn't could all these they had an advantage. And that's why once they did make the raise, the only way they could deal with losing a competitive advantage is by trying to get the government to raise the minimum wage on everybody, right? So it's sad, really, 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 really sad. And all of you, all the people who supported Trump in his attacks on Amazon, all the people who supported Tucker Carlson and their attack on Amazon, now you get the consequence. You get more cronyism, more entrenchment, more government, ultimately, not explicit government intervention, but implicit government intervention where they don't even have to pass a law. Business already cooperates with them. And at the same time, business is lobbying for all kinds of other things at the same time. It's truly, truly horrific. It's interesting. Is the fact while Amazon increased an hour, what they also did was they eliminated bonuses and stock awards to these same employees. So on the one hand, the employees are getting a higher fixed rate, but they are losing their stock awards and their monthly bonuses. You know, is that a good trade-off? It's not. I'm not sure it's good. It's certainly not good for Amazon, right? Amazon would to really salary actually to go down their total compensation to actually down. And this is, of course, the kind of policies. Amazon cannot pay its work above market prices. Amazon cannot pay its workers $100 an hour. Why? Because then it can't compete. It can't compete. So Amazon is in a position where the only way it can raise the minimum wage to its employees is by decreasing their wages, decreasing the using the bonuses and the stock awards, which is part of the reason you get bonuses and stock awards is to incentivize, is to motivate. It has an important function in the company. But again, politics and business should not go together. And the only way to separate politics and business is to make the people with a gun unable to use it. In other words, the only way to eliminate cronyism is to cripple government, or basically to limit government to its proper function, to make it impossible for government, to use its gun on business, make it impossible for government to regulate, to control government. The only way to get rid of cronyism is to separate economics from politics. It's to separate economics from politics. And until we do that, we will have cronyism because business has defended itself. It has defended itself. So, it's sad. It really, when I read this about Amazon, it was sad and inevitable, because when the right and the left unite against you, you're going to give in. You're going to capitulate. And even Amazon, as great of a company as it is, as much as I love Jeff Bezos, as much as I love everything Amazon does, even Amazon has caved, given the left both rallying against. So it's this split between reason and emotion. Those poor employees who don't make enough money, and to think about the welfare state, to think about the taxes, to think about the lack of productivity and growth because of regulations, because of controls, because of all this garbage. That requires thinking, that requires studying, that requires knowledge, that requires reason. To emote, to feel, that's easy. That's easy. And that's what everybody plays on. That's what Trump plays on. That's what the Democrats play on. That's what everybody plays on. And unfortunately, the consequences mean otherwise they get bulldozed. Sorry about the internet connection problems. I'll be back in Puerto Rico on Sunday night. We'll see when I do a show, probably Monday and Tuesday. And then I'll probably do some shows from the road, but they'll all be in the US. So hopefully we'll have better bandwidth connections, although even there, hotels are not very good. I just saw a headline flash by. There was like, I don't know. It was about Ford Motor Company slashing jobs and globally. And all I say is, yeah, tariffs. That's what happens. That's what happens. All right. Let's call this a day. Thank you all. Thanks for your support. Those of you who have not yet supported me on Patreon, go to Patreon now and do so. Yaron Brook Show, or if you prefer to support the show, you can do so on PayPal, paypal.me/Yaron Brook Show. Um, it's the money that comes from both of those sources that makes the show possible, that sustain the show. The show is not supported by the supported by the Institute, supported by any money that you can pay Patreon. You want to see this help us by supporting us. Great. Thanks, everybody. See you next week when I'm back in the States.